As creatives, it sometimes feels like everyone's got an opinion about what we do, right?
Right.
Clients, audiences, and even that little voice inside our heads.
Ugh. Tell me about it. That inner critic can be brutal.
It really can. And so, in this deep dive, we're going to unpack all of that.
Okay.
We're tackling this idea of expectations head on.
I like it.
We'll be looking at the source material, handling expectations as a creative, thriving despite disappointment.
Sounds good.
It's interesting because this whole topic got me thinking about all the famous creatives who faced tons of rejection early on.
Yeah, for sure. It's like a rite of passage almost.
It is. Like, can you imagine if they'd let those setbacks crush them? We'd be missing out on so much amazing art.
Absolutely. I mean, think about all the iconic works that almost never saw the light of day. It's mind-blowing.
Totally. So let's dive into this.
Mm.
When we talk about expectations, where do we even begin?
Well, I think the first thing to recognize is that expectations come from all angles.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you've got the external ones from clients, audiences, even just the industry in general.
The pressure to deliver, to get those likes, to please everyone.
Exactly. And then you've got the internal pressure.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
This is where that perfectionism and self-doubt creep in.
It can be so crippling. Like, sometimes I feel like I put more pressure on myself than anyone else ever could.
Yeah. No, that's definitely a common struggle for creatives. It's like we set these impossibly high standards for ourselves.
Right, and then we get disappointed when we don't reach them, even if everyone else is happy with the work.
Exactly. So it's almost like we're battling on two fronts.
We are. It's like this constant push and pull. But, it makes me wonder, isn't some internal pressure a good thing?
That's a great question.
I mean, maybe it's what drives us to refine our work, to keep experimenting, to actually push boundaries, right?
I think it's a matter of finding that sweet spot.
Okay, yeah.
Like a healthy dose of pressure can be motivating, but when it becomes overwhelming, that's when it becomes a problem.
So how do we know when it's too much? Like, how do we tell if the expectations we're facing, both from ourselves and others, are actually healthy?
That's a tough one. I think it requires a lot of self-awareness.
Yeah, definitely.
Being honest with ourselves about what we can realistically handle.
Right, and knowing our limits.
Yeah. And also recognizing that not all expectations are created equal.
True. Some are definitely more valid than others.
Exactly. So it's about learning to discern which ones to prioritize and which ones to, well, maybe just let go of.
Okay, so let's say we're getting a handle on this. We're setting realistic expectations. But what about when things don't go as planned? How do we deal with those inevitable moments of disappointment or rejection that come with putting our work out there?
Well, that's where the whole idea of reframing failure as feedback comes in.
Okay, yeah, tell me more about that.
So instead of seeing setbacks as personal defeats, what if we try to view them as opportunities to learn and grow?
Okay, I like that.
It's not about denying the sting of rejection, but rather shifting our perspective and asking, okay, what can I take away from this experience? What can I do differently next time?
I love that. It's about turning those negative experiences into something positive, or at least something useful.
Exactly.
Because, let's face it, rejection can be brutal, even for the most successful creatives.
Really can.
Didn't Stephen King get, 30 rejections for Carrie before it finally got published?
Something like that. And, I mean, can you imagine if he'd given up?
Nope. The world would be a much less scary place.
Exactly. And that's the power of resilience, right?
So how do we develop that? How do we cultivate that mental toughness to navigate the inevitable ups and downs of a creative life?
Well, it's a practice like anything else.
Okay.
It involves things like positive self-talk, focusing on our past wins, and not being afraid to ask for support when we need it.
Support is huge, right?
It is. Having a community of people who understand what you're going through, who can offer encouragement and advice.
Absolutely. It's like having a safety net for your creative soul.
I love that.
But, even with the best support system in the world, sometimes it's hard to drown out all the external noise, the pressure to conform, to fit into a certain mold. How do we stay true to our unique vision when everyone seems to have an opinion about it?
That's where it becomes crucial to prioritize our own validation over external validation.
Okay, explain that a little more.
So it's easy to get caught up in chasing likes, awards, positive reviews. But at the end of the day, true artistic fulfillment comes from creating work that resonates with you, that you're proud of, regardless of what anyone else thinks.
I get that. But how do we filter through all the feedback? How do we know which critiques to listen to and which ones to just ignore?
It's about learning to distinguish between constructive criticism and just plain noise.
Right. Not all criticism is created equal.
Exactly. So when you receive feedback, ask yourself, is this specific? Is it actionable? Does it align with my overall creative goals? If not, it might be time to hit that mental delete button.
Okay, I love that. It's like a criticism detox.
Exactly.
We've talked about a lot of the challenges, but I want to shift gears for a moment.
Okay, yeah.
Let's bring it back to the heart of why we do what we do, the passion.
Yes.
How do we keep that creative fire burning bright, even when we're faced with all this pressure and uncertainty?
That's such a good question. I think for me, it's about shifting the focus from seeking approval to finding personal fulfillment.
I like that.
It's about remembering why we fell in love with creating in the first place.
Yes, that initial spark, that pure joy of bringing something new into the world.
Exactly. And sometimes it's as simple as giving ourselves permission to play again.
To experiment, to take risks, to not be afraid of making mistakes.
Yeah. Because ultimately, that's where the real magic happens.
Absolutely. And having a supportive community doesn't hurt either.
Oh, for sure. Makes a world of difference.
So we've covered a lot of ground today. Any final thoughts?
I think the biggest takeaway is this. Expectations are a part of life, but they don't have to define us. We can choose how we respond to them. We can use them as fuel to push ourselves further, or we can let them hold us back.
It's about finding that balance, right?
Yeah, it is. And trusting ourselves.
That's so important. Trusting our instincts, our vision, even when it feels scary.
You got it.
This has been such an insightful conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was fun.
As we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a little something to ponder. What if, instead of fearing rejection, we saw it as a redirection?
I like that.
An opportunity to course correct, to learn, to refine our craft, and ultimately to create something even more meaningful.
Yeah, that's powerful.
So next time you encounter a setback, remember this. It's not the end of the road. It might just be the beginning of something even better. You've got this.